The click was barely audible over the carnival music drifting up from 80 feet below, a tinny pop song, the smell of fried dough rising on warm air, the lazy rotation of the wheel carrying 3 people in a single gondola toward the top of the arc, and then a sound that should never happen at that altitude, the metallic snap of a safety harness buckle releasing. What happened next, you already know. The title told you. But here's the question that actually matters, the one that will pull at you through everything that follows. Why does a person look directly at a warning sign, read it, understand it, and then decide it doesn't apply to them? Not why did she do it? Why do we do it? Because the answer is more uncomfortable than you're expecting, and it lives closer to home than the Karen label would like you to believe. There are 2 other things worth holding onto as this story unfolds. First, what is it exactly about a single person shifting their weight that can destabilize a gondola traveling at near zero speed? The engineering answer is genuinely surprising. And second, were there people on the ground in that car who could have stopped this before it started? And if so, why didn't they? This is not a mockery video. What happened on that wheel was preventable, painful, and deeply human. And understanding it might be the most useful thing you do today. Ferris wheel gondolas look simple. They are boxes on a wheel. But the engineering underneath that simplicity is doing something subtle and important. Every gondola is suspended on a pivot point specifically designed to self-level. Gravity does the work. As the wheel rotates, the gondola hangs freely from its axle, and the weight of the passengers keeps the floor pointing down. It is elegant. It is passive. It requires no power, no sensors, no active correction. But that elegance comes with a hidden assumption baked into the design. The system works when weight stays within a narrow tolerance zone centered low and distributed across the bench seat. Think of it like a pendulum. A pendulum at rest hangs straight down because its center of mass is directly below the pivot. The moment you shift that mass laterally, the pendulum wants to swing. Gondola suspension pivots are engineered to resist that swing within normal parameters. Someone leaning to look over the edge, a child squirming in their seat. What they are not designed to absorb is a 200-pound load standing upright and walking from one side of the car to the other. Here's the part the eye never sees. When a passenger is seated, their center of mass sits low in the car and close to the center line, almost directly beneath the pivot, exactly where the design wants it. The self-leveling mechanism only has to manage tiny restoring forces, because the lever arm between the mass and the pivot is short. Stand up, and that center of mass rises by 2 or 3 feet in an instant. Walk sideways, and it slides off the center line. You have now lengthened the lever arm in 2 directions at once, and the restoring torque the pivot can passively generate does not scale to meet it. The physics that kept the floor level a moment ago is suddenly outmatched by the physics you just introduced. Standing raises the center of gravity. Moving laterally shifts horizontal mass. Do both simultaneously, and you've created a pendulum torque effect that the passive pivot mechanism cannot instantly counter. The gondola doesn't gently tilt, it lurches. This is why the warning sign is not bureaucratic theater. It is not the ride operator covering their liability. Stay seated. Keep arms and legs inside. Do not stand or shift positions. Every one of those instructions is a load management directive written in the language of physics. Stay seated keeps the mass low. Don't shift positions keeps it centered. The sentences sound like manners. They are actually mechanics. The sign is posted at eye level. It is visible before you board and visible during the ride. There is no fine print. There is no ambiguity. The warning is not hidden. It is the loudest thing in the gondola, and it was ignored completely. Reconstruct the moment in slow motion because the timeline matters. The gondola is near the top of its arc. The wheel has slowed. Many Ferris wheels pause briefly at the apex to let riders take in the view, which is exactly the problem. The pause feels like stillness. It feels like safety. The The ground is far away, but from up there it doesn't look far away. It looks like a photograph, small and flat and unreal. She unbuckles. That's the first decision, and it's the one that opens the door to everything else. One deliberate action. Thumb on the release, the click, the harness going slack. Her two companions are right there. They see it happen. She stands. That's the second decision. The gondola shifts slightly. A gentle warning, the physics is already offering, already speaking in the only language it has. She doesn't hear it. She begins crossing to the other side of the car to reposition for the photo. That's the third decision, and it's the one that crosses the threshold the suspension was never designed to handle. A standing adult in motion, weight transferring laterally, center of gravity elevated, the gondola doesn't tilt. It lurches, hard, sudden, the kind of movement that gives you no time to grab anything, because there is nothing to grab, because she had already released the one thing that was holding her in place. 80 feet, that's the fall. For context, an 8-story building is roughly 80 feet. The average person reaches terminal velocity awareness, the point where the brain registers that the ground is coming and there is nothing to stop it, in under a second. She had less than 2 seconds of free fall before impact. The selfie never got taken. Here is the part of this story that rarely makes it into the viral clip or the comment section. She was not alone in that gondola. 2 other people watched her unbuckle. 2 other people watched her stand. 2 other people watched her begin to cross the car, and neither of them said a word. That is not an accusation. It is a documented pattern with a name. Normalization of deviance. The concept was formalized by sociologist Diane Vaughan in her analysis of the Challenger space shuttle disaster. The idea that when someone in your group breaks a rule casually, confidently, without apparent consequence, the social pressure to object doesn't just decrease, it evaporates. The rule breaker's confidence becomes a kind of social proof. She seems to know what she's doing. She's done this before. Who am I to be the one who kills the moment? And notice how little time there was to act on the objection, even if someone had felt it. From the click of the buckle to the lurch of the car was a span of seconds. Stopping her would have required a companion to override the instinct to stay quiet, name the danger out loud, and physically intervene, all inside the same window in which their brains were still reading her confidence as competence. By the time objecting would have felt worth it, the physics had already finished the conversation. This same dynamic has been identified in aviation cockpit recordings, in industrial accident investigations, in hospital operating rooms. Someone in authority, or someone who simply acts with authority, does something unsafe, and the people around them go quiet. Not because they're cowardly, because the human brain is wired to read social confidence as competence. Her companions likely didn't think, I should stop her and I'm choosing not to. They thought nothing at all, or they thought, she's fine, she knows what she's doing. That is the insidious part. Normalization of deviance doesn't feel like a choice, it feels like common sense. Down on the ground, ride operators were monitoring the wheel. How closely? That depends on the fare, the staffing, the time of day, the number of gondolas in motion. At most traveling carnivals and county fairs, a single operator manages the entire ride, controlling speed, managing boarding, collecting tickets. Watching every gondola simultaneously at the top of the arc is not physically possible. This is a known gap in amusement ride safety, not a secret, a known gap. And it has never been fully closed. Closing it would mean more staff, cameras on every car, or restraints that lock until the ride stops, costs a thin margin carnival rarely absorbs until a verdict forces it to. The Karen framing online strips all of this out. It leaves only the fall and the label. It turns a preventable incident with multiple contributing factors, engineering tolerance, bystander psychology, operator monitoring gaps, into a simple morality play, bad person, deserved consequence. That framing is satisfying. It is also wrong. Let's talk about why this video went viral, because that's worth sitting with for a moment. The Karen label does specific psychological work. It pre-assigns blame before the viewer has seen a single second of footage. It strips the subject of sympathy. And crucially, it gives the viewer permission to enjoy the consequence. to watch an 80-foot fall and feel not horror, but a kind of righteous satisfaction. She had it coming. The label transforms a tragedy into a comeuppance, and our brains find comeuppances deeply chemically rewarding. But here's what that framing costs us: the lesson. If this happened because she was a bad person, a Karen, a specific type, a category we can safely place ourselves outside of, then it has nothing to teach us. We are not her. We would never do that. We can watch, feel superior, and move on without examining anything about our own behavior. The data doesn't cooperate with that story. The Consumer Product Safety Commission estimates thousands of amusement ride injuries annually in the United States. A significant portion involve riders who bypassed, removed, or ignored safety restraints. The victims are not a single demographic. They are children who unbuckled out of boredom during a long ride, teenagers daring each other at the top of a loop, adults who stood up for a better view, for a photo, for a laugh, for 10 seconds of feeling like the rules were optional. The Karen label applies to none of them and explains none of it. What explains it is something far less comfortable and far more universal. So let's close the loops. The gondola physics. A standing adult crossing laterally from one side of the car to the other, raised the center of gravity and shifted horizontal mass simultaneously, creating a pendulum torque effect that exceeded the passive self-correction capacity of the suspension pivot. The gondola lurched. She had no restraint and no handhold. The outcome was mechanical, not moral. The operators, ground-level monitoring of individual gondolas during active operation is inconsistent across traveling fairs and carnivals. A single operator managing an entire ride cannot maintain visual contact with every car at the top of the arc. This is a documented industry gap that has been flagged in safety reviews for decades. It has not been resolved. Now, the central question, the one we've been circling since that first click of a harness buckle: why do people ignore warnings they can clearly see? The answer is not stupidity. It is not recklessness in any premeditated sense. It is the universal human tendency to discount future risk when present reward feels immediate and certain. Psychologists have names for the machinery involved. Temporal discounting. The brain assigns less weight to a cost the further away it sits in time, and a fall that hasn't happened yet sits in the future by definition. Optimism bias. The near universal conviction that bad outcomes are things that happen to other people. Habituation. The 100th time you ignore a warning with no consequence teaches you, falsely, that the warning was never real. Stack those three together and you get a brain that looks straight at a hazard and feels sincerely safe. The warning sign described an abstract future consequence, something that might happen, something that happened to other people, something statistical and distant. The selfie was real. The laughter of her companions was real. The view from 80 feet was real and immediate and right now. Her brain ran the calculation that every human brain runs dozens of times a day. The bad thing probably won't happen, and the good thing is right here. Her brain was wrong, by the margin of 80 feet. Here's the question worth sitting with. When did you last see a warning sign and decide it probably didn't apply to you? Not on a Ferris wheel necessarily, a medication warning, a wet floor sign, a seatbelt in a parking lot, a caution label on something you've used 100 times before. We all run that calculation. Most of the time, we get away with it. Most of the time, the gondola doesn't lurch. If you've ever found yourself thinking about risk differently than you did before, about how confidence gets mistaken for competence, about how a warning sign and a selfie can exist in the same brain, and only one of them feels real, hit subscribe. Not to support this channel, but to be part of a group of people who actually want to understand why things go wrong, not just watch them go wrong. What's your honest answer to that question? When was the last time you saw a clear warning and decided it didn't apply to you? Drop it in the comments, no judgment. The whole point is that this is more universal than the Karen label wants us to admit. The carnival is still running. Somewhere right now, a wheel is turning, a gondola is rising, and a warning sign is doing everything it was designed to do. Whether anyone really reads it, in the way that changes behavior, is a different question entirely. The sign was there that day too. It was the loudest thing in the gondola, and in the 3 seconds between the click of a buckle and the lurch of a car, it might as well have been written in a language no one spoke.